Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and once again I'm speaking with Susan Dugan about A Course in Miracles. And today we thought we would talk about Workbook Lesson 167, which is There is One Life and That I Share with God. And we also recognize that it addresses what is, in the Course in Miracles, in the pure non-dual metaphysics of its teachings, what is opposite to life, which is the whole realm of birth and death as we think of it. So we thought this would be a good topic for any time of year, really, but not just Halloween or whatever. But anyway, so thank you for suggesting this topic, Susan. It's always a good one. And one that's close to all of us, because we all think we're mortals and have that belief system. Any initial comments you'd like to make before we dive into it?
Yeah. So the name of it again, it's lesson 167, and there is one life, and that I share with God. And we all think, as you were saying, that we live that we live apart from God, that we're bodies, and that the body, and that we're mortal bodies. That we our body has a shelf life, and so that really is it, always in the back of our minds. From the time we're born, that we may or may not, as children, become familiar with the idea of death, but we certainly do as we grow up and the older we get, become more and more familiar with death, and eventually encounter people that we love and know, and friends and loved ones, and eventually parents and all of that, who are aging and dying. And we're aging, and we know where that leads. And so this becomes a more and more pressing sort of issue for us. As it's easy to dissociate it when you're very young, but it becomes more and more challenging as our bodies age. And I was drawn to this lesson in particular to discuss now, because we're asked to make the Course very specific in our lives, even though it's really the content is all the same of what we're learning. We're asked to apply it very, very specifically in what seems to be the life that we're living as bodies. And that's the kind of formula that the Course uses, is to change the purpose of our experience in relationships in the world to a classroom of a new kind of forgiveness, which is really the healing of our belief that we have a will separate from God, that we created a different will, that we that we sinned against love, we pushed love away, and and created a God that actually knew about it, and then had to flee love to now love is the enemy, and because we're sinners, and in the back of our mind, even though that's very deeply buried within all of us, it's very, very much fueling all of our behavior. Everyone here believes that they're a refugee from love. That's not conscious, but it's certainly acted out constantly in our relationships. And so for me, the specific of this application, I actually just thought about this lesson and went to it because I'm dealing right now with my mother being in having entered home hospice care about 6 weeks ago, and really not as a result of underlying disease of the body, physical disease anyway, but of the she really doesn't want to be here anymore. She's 86 or 7. I always have to remember how old I am to remember how old she is, but she she just really doesn't. She broke her hip a couple years ago, and my dad had a stroke about 5 years ago, and her life has changed in ways that she doesn't want to be here anymore. And so the family in different. I am very far away. I'm here in Denver, and they're in upstate New York on the border of Canada, at a place that's very difficult for me to get to from Denver. But the rest of my family is all still in New York State, and much more involved on a day-to-day basis with this, and which they're really being great, but to deal with it. But so the challenges of looking at that, though, and the anguish even of being so far away and trying to figure out, do I go? Do I stay? What role can I play? Will I be, what would be helpful under the constraints of my own financial and challenges, work, and also, my house is on the market. There's all these other challenges that are going on here that make it more challenging than it normally would be. So it's really that trying to figure out, to apply this in my life. What I was observing in myself was how I just kind of, I'll get a call from my family or I'll call them, and I totally throw the course out the window. I just I become, it's like it just triggers my DNA, and I just want to jump into the whole thing and in some way rescue, and in some way, sacrifice, or I feel guilty because I'm not there and they're sacrificing. And, I'm telling myself all these, making up tons and tons of stories that may or may not have any reality whatsoever, even within the dream. And so it's been a great classroom for me to really have to keep bringing myself back to the course, keep bringing myself back to Jesus, to want to be normal in how I respond, but to also remember what the course is saying about bodies living and dying, and to put that, become right-minded again about it. So this lesson has been very helpful to me, as one of the things that jumped out at me in remembering the course's teaching, that we are not really, what it's talking about is that we are not a self apart from God. We think we made a separate self, a separate body that, lives and dies and has this punishing story of I exist, but it's not my fault. It's somewhat, we try to sort of all suffer and sacrifice throughout our lives in some way, with the final punishment being death, to in some way exonerate ourselves for the guilt that we feel over believing that we're separate from God. And it really is a lie. And, becoming right-minded means putting on the brakes when we're finding ourselves in that kind of, egomania, and just kind of, at least we remember that, I do remember that. I mean, what happens is I do that, and then I'm like, wait a minute, and I asked to become, I really work with our inner teacher, Jesus, that symbol of that loving presence of wholeness and eternity, and safety in our mind, to become right-minded and to get my ego out of the way so that I can see this clearly. And usually, when that happens, at least so far, and while going through the conversations, and also, trying to establish whether I'm needed there or not, I can become right-minded, and I don't really have the clarity yet that I need to rush in, so far. I mean, that may change, but what we're asked to do is to really try to become right-minded about it. And ultimately, as you were saying at the beginning, becoming right-minded is remembering the metaphysics of the course, as well as being kind and gentle with ourselves in seeing how much we really want to make the body real, and that this, that death, like the belief in birth and the belief in life and thriving here in the world, is the same mistake, and really the only healing can happen, the only life and rebirth that can happen, is once we are able to step back and return to that loving presence in our mind, within which life has no opposite, and death is just a really a silly idea. It's not the punishing idea that we think it is. It really has, as this lesson tells us, no effects at all. So anyway, I've talked too much, but so that's
no, I have very, very right on commentary.
and that's really why I chose it. And,
yeah.
It's relevant for everyone. That's a course student,
Right. And it is a very challenging classroom, and there's nowhere in A Course in Miracles that it suggests that it's easy. It's always simple, but it's never necessarily easy. Yeah.
We think we're bodies, we start out there, and we're not asked to deny, and
Yeah. In fact, that is our classroom, isn't it? To while we're mentally reviewing the "I'm not a body, I'm free, I'm still as God created me" philosophy, to deal, like you say, with the utmost kindness to ourselves and others, and recognize that we can afford to be patient. There's really nothing that we need to be concerned about, and I like how you were sharing the the fueling aspect of those circumstances. And not only does it happen on an individual level, that the ego's interpretations fuel that insanity, the vicious cycle kind of thing, on an individual level, but collectively, I mean, how many religions would there be if there were not the guilt, sin, fear, death paradigm fueled by the belief in duality and separation? I mean, without that, if there's no other, if there's no consciousness, if there's nothing to be conscious of that's outside of capital S self, there's not a whole lot to come and go and be born and die and like Shakespeare's the comings and goings on the stage.
Right.
It's
And
all.
an idea that's embedded in many religions, in most religions, I think, and even if you're not religious, in our relationships of sacrifice, of the belief that that somehow if I suffer enough, I'm going to be treated kindly by God at the end, and I'll make it into heaven. And that's we know there's something rotten about that, as Ken would say, because if it doesn't include everyone, it can't be God. It can't be true.
Right.
So so
Yeah,
our effort
the
kind of
preemptive punishment is insane, just as believing that someone else could be less innocent than we, or vice versa. And how could we all be anything less than perfect innocence in truth, and yet our sensory data and our experience is anything but that, isn't it?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we might want to, I don't know, read a couple
Yes. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it. You
Yeah,
want to start in?
sure.
Okay.
So there are not different kinds of life, for life is like the truth. It does not have degrees. It is the one condition in which all that God created share. Like all his thoughts, it has no opposite. There is no death because what God created shares his life. There is no death because an opposite to God does not exist. There is no death because the Father and the Son are one, which means there is no life apart from God. Right?
Sounds pretty non-dual to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, we don't really want to look at this. We don't really want to hear this. It's very threatening to the ego. And it only becomes ultimately comforting, after we've really become committed students of the course. And even then it's threatening.
Right. Right.
But,
It's
yeah,
our individuality that is threatened.
right.
It's
Yes.
not an indivi oneness. It's individuality that we're all attached to and invested in. Huh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you want to keep reading, you can. But
Sure. Sure. Yeah, this is good stuff. In this world, there appears to be a state that is life's opposite. You call it death. Yet we have learned that the idea of death takes many forms. It is the one idea which underlies all feelings that are not supremely happy. It is the alarm to which you give response of any kind that is not perfect joy. Well, that covers a lot of ground for most of us.
that's the only way of looking at death. Because it's really the same as guilt. Like guilt, it is the one. Death upholds the idea of sin. That the overthrowing of the kingdom is real, and now guilt is necessary. We have to do something about it, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's really the denial of being in favor of a temporary existence, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yep. And we'll take care of the punishment so that God won't have to, because in our delusional story, God knows about this, and
Right,
of
right.
course that's the one big error.
Yeah, I actually I never really thought about that way. But the ego's strategy, insane in every respect, is that I'll take that preemptive strike against myself by martyrdom and victimization, and all that, because that way we don't have to wait around for the punishment from capital G God that's never going to happen, and so that it further validates that belief. It's a further insane strategy to avoid having to look at the fact that there never is any real punishment from the oneness that is the real capital G God that is beyond space time and individuality. Yeah.
Right, and we do it not just through physical and physical pain and death, but we do it through failure, through self-sabotage, through not I have a rough life, right?
Mhm.
through choosing situations that make us miserable. Again, that's a way to suffer and say, look, God, yeah, I might be a miserable sinner, but I'm suffering here. I'm really suffering, and that will somehow atone for what I did. Please go easy on me, right?
Yeah, which brings up another point that you touched on earlier is how important it is to be gentle and kind with ourselves when we find ourselves, in that insane mode of thinking, and realize that, condemning ourselves for being condemning, or victimizing victimizers, or whatever behavior that just adds kerosene to the fire is counterproductive. We just need to just say, oh, like Ken always said, that there I go again,
Right.
afraid of love, making the nightmare real, and there's nothing to be feel bad about. It's not sinful, evil, or wicked. It's just silly, and we can from that little aha moment where we catch ourselves, move on, huh?
Right. I've sort of started asking myself, because that's been like the story of my, the self-judgment. I'm huge on self-judgment and always have been, with the course and with everything else. But I've started sort of thinking about it as, would Jesus agree with me? Does Jesus agree with me here? And if not, then I know, again, that's been very helpful in watching my behavior with my family and stuff, and being on the phone and all of this, huge drama that comes up within me. And to just say, well, no, I mean, Jesus doesn't. And so it is that frightened child from lesson 182 that is being, that you're choosing to trigger within yourself through this, and that's the part of us that really believes in guilt, and is terribly frightened. And that's all. I mean, that coincidentally, that's also the personal self that we made, that has all its stories about its role in the family and how damaged it is, and how whatever side of all of that everybody's on, because everybody feels that in some way there's something terribly wrong with them, and that in some way that their parents are responsible for it, right? So and that's, I can always emphasize that. And I was just listening again to the CD set, Parents and Children, which is fantastic, and really kind of looks at that, the dynamics of how that plays out, which is really an expression of the authority problem that the course talks about. From both sides, from the side of being a parent and from the side of being a grown child of a parent. And it's very helpful CD set. But yeah.
Ego doesn't mess around. It always delivers an all-inclusive, all expenses asked package that includes all kinds of misery that's customized for the specific types of guilt that we have tailored for our undoing classroom. Fortunately, we have an inner teacher that helps us through each specific, and leads us out of the cavernous labyrinth of our mind, but back to the piece we never left, huh?
Right. And we still have to, I mean, our part is only to really question our conclusion about the cause of why we're really freaking out right now. And that is really, I mean, that's I'm absolutely amazed this time going through the text in the class that I teach on Tuesday nights here in Denver, because I can't even believe how many places that he tells us how small our role is, and it's just, and how everything else is not up to us, has nothing to do with us. Just leave it alone, drop it. I mean, he just tells us in so many different ways, and yet we're like trying to take, to control the whole process, right? Including managing his love.
I'm picturing a Twister game where, it's like when something comes up, it's like that we don't want to have a certain way, as long as there's an outcome that we're attached to, uh, there's another appendage that reaches out to try to cover that position, and whether it's a white knuckled grip, or it's some kind of a, we're obsessively compulsively trying to manipulate our dream world. The phrase I use a lot is recovering dream repair technician, but we're always, kind of reaching for, oh, if I can just fix this, and if I get my lists organized well enough, and if I can just
right.
tackle enough things in one day, then I'll feel better about myself. No, we've got it backwards again. We just have to feel better about ourselves, and then we won't be concerned about what happens.
Well, a lot of times the doing just I mean, that's exactly right, you know, and I mean, sometimes we still feel inspired to act in
Oh,
some
of course. Not that we don't do things. It's
case,
just
then I know, then it's a knowing, you know,
yeah,
and I'm not, there's no ambivalence about it.
right.
But almost 80% of the time for me, you know, I become right-minded, and it's like, what? Wait a minute, what was I trying to do here? You know, so yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, with my house, I'm going to add that in too, because, but when I finally kind of just said, you know, whatever's going on with this house, it's not up to me. It has nothing to do with me, and I can see peace instead of this, and just let it go. And you know, I mean, nothing's happened with the house, but I'm much happier. It's not causing that constant strife that it was, you know. And I mean, the truth is, it's not up to me, you know. This, I mean, the dream is we chose a script. We know how it's going once, you know, day to day, by discovering what's happening around us, you know. And that's about it. So anyway, but
Yeah.
a much better place to be coming from, that quiet center, than trying to muscle through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So where were we here?
I think I was about halfway through the second paragraph. Why don't I just
Yeah, keep that.
finish that one off then? Let's see. Um, well, let's start with the third sentence.
Yeah.
Yet we have learned that the idea of death takes many forms. It is the one idea which underlies all feelings that are not supremely happy.
Yeah.
It is the alarm to which you give response of any kind that is not perfect joy. All sorrow, loss, anxiety, and suffering and pain, even a little sigh of weariness, a slight discomfort, or the merest frown acknowledge death and thus deny you live. Well, he's basically saying, you know, we're selling ourselves short with the ego, because anything that's less than an totally unshakable, perfect peace is aiming too low.
Is identifying with the body. Is
Yeah,
identifying
yeah,
with, with a lie.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, God's will for us is perfect happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Not, you know, not in the dream, but the happiness, I mean, not in the form of the dream,
Right.
but yeah, even within the dream. I mean, it's not true that my unhappiness is caused by all these, you know, changing circumstances in my life, including this changing circumstance of my body, or your body, or my mom's body, you know. So yeah, I mean, how wonderful is that?
It really is. And as you were saying that, it reminded me of the title of one of the workshops, the streaming workshops that Jeff and Rosemary gave a few months ago. That's also in the course. Is, you know, the way to find joy in a joyless place is to remember that you're not there, and that our identity really has to be, if we're going to be peaceful, has to be outside the dream. And then whatever happens or doesn't happen in the dream, it's not that it's irrelevant in the sense that we don't give a damn, or yeah, we don't participate. It's just that we're our core identity and our peace of mind is not shaken by that. We're not disturbed by appearances, because we know they're appearances. We know that it's a show. It's a holographic projection of, you know, vast proportions, outrageously popular, and we've mostly bought into it. But we're learning to not buy into it and to change our investment into a self that's completely shared. And I think that's where Ken's brilliance in the journey through the manual, where he talks about, you know, the two things that manual for teachers talks about is, you know, shared interest and then trusting the Holy Spirit, and how they go hand in hand. And the shared interest really is developing a shared identity, and that you know, where everyone's welfare is the only thing that we care about. In truth, well, we appear to do things in the world that reflect individual interest, but we can just remember that shared interest. It seems like that kind of helps us get back to a peaceful state where, you know, we can just give it our best shot in the world, but remember that our innocence and our true identity has not been compromised in the least by anything that happens or doesn't happen. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. Should we keep going, or?
Sure. You want to read the third paragraph?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to put my glasses on. I have the lighting here. You think that death is of the body, yet it is but an idea, irrelevant to what is seen as physical. A thought is in the mind. It can be then applied as mind directs it, but its origin is where it must be changed if change occurs. Ideas leave not their source. There's the quote from the Course.
Mm-hmm.
So, we are, I mean, on the level one, as Ken would say, on the, higher metaphysical level, we have never left our source, our oneness with God in the mind, and we remain awake in God, dreaming of exile, right? But we have also not left the decision-making mind on level two. The whole projection of the world is still really just circulating in the decision-making mind's choice to believe the ego. And nothing's really going on out there.
Beating a dead horse, metaphorically, aren't we?
Yeah, and I mean I don't think that it's good to try to shout down your feelings
No,
about
of course not.
with metaphysics, or that even the shift to right mind necessarily involves sort of all of the reviewing of the metaphysics. Like it just kind of happens that we're not identified with it anymore. I mean, we need that intellectual foundation along with the practice of the Course.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important to have that. But the actual practice, it just, when we become right-minded, it's just not a problem, what we thought what was a problem before, because we're not identified with the personal self's vulnerability, imaginary vulnerability or neediness to prove that it's less guilty than some, whoever the object of projection is at that time. Right? So, yeah.
Target du jour. Huh?
Right, exactly. Anyway. So ideas leave not their source. The emphasis this Course has placed on that idea is due to its centrality in our attempts to change your mind about yourself. Again, we're trying to learn that we are a mind and not a body. It is the reason you can heal. It is the cause of healing. It is why you cannot die. Its truth established you as one with God. We never changed that reality. That's a lie. The tiny mad idea, I mean, the belief was the problem. The failure to laugh at our childish wish was the problem. But it still had no consequences. It's over. It was over long ago, of course, right?
Yeah.
So,
it's a done deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shall I read the next one?
Sure.
Okay. Death is the thought that you are separate from your creator. It is the belief conditions change, emotions alternate because of causes you cannot control, you did not make, and you can never change. It is the fixed belief that ideas can leave their source and take on qualities the source does not contain, becoming different from their own origin, apart from it in kind as well as distance, time, and form. It kind of reminds me of an acronym I found helpful that was kind of based on one of Ken's commentaries in somewhere anyway. It was GIST, guilt, individuality, space, and time. I figure if I'm invested in any of those aspects, the GIST of guilt, individuality, space, or time, I'm pretty much barking up the ego tree and or park myself in front of the wrong ladder, and I'm not going to get very far.
Yeah, or I mean, even as you said earlier, anything but joy.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything, and Ken used to say anything but, if you're feeling anything but kindly toward everyone and everything, including yourself, then you've chosen the ego. So that's
and not beat yourself up when you catch yourself doing that. I think that's
so it's really
important.
always about recognizing how we put ourselves front and center. And then there's like the backing up from that. I mean, usually it becomes, I mean, through this practice, there are times when we don't have to do that because it just happens, we're spending more time right-minded and we don't have to back up if we're not having, if nothing's broken, you don't have to fix it, right? But if, whenever we are catching ourselves being anything less than kind or anything less than joyful, then we know we've chosen the ego, and we can play in that sandbox, as Ken used to say, as long as we want, but we're still going to get sand in our eyes, and it's not going to have any different outcome ever.
Making much ado about nothing, huh?
So, and I mean, then we have to face, being a mortal body subject to dying. I mean, it's terrifying what the human condition is. This guilty, belief that we have to kind of somehow differentiate ourselves to become one of the chosen ones, mostly through trying to throw other people under the bus and make it not look like that's what we're doing. That's kind of sucks. So and you never end up feeling less guilty because you're throwing people under the bus, and you can't really completely dissociate that.
A lot of corpses down the road of our mind, aren't there? Yeah, but they're imaginary courses. That's the saving grace.
Lying and saying no. I was doing something completely different.
Yeah.
All those special relationship bargains that we have, where we're trying to manipulate each other into kindness to destroy, showing that we are really nice people, and we're conscious that we're lying. That we're trying to portray ourselves in order we're giving to get, which is what the ego's idea of giving is, right?
It also seems like, without launching into another topic that could easily take another few hours, a perfect example of that is the political drama, in not only in this country but around the world, that's going on in the last, let's just say, year and a half or so. And just noticing, wow, what an amazing projection and an opportunity for everyone to look at their unconscious mind displayed in full, vibrant Technicolor forgiveness opportunities to see, the parts of ourselves that we think are less than worthy of seeing the perfect innocence, while acknowledging the behavior, not like you say, not denying, not stuffing down any feelings or thoughts, but just watching that whole, stream of stuff go by without condemnation. And that really becomes a very freeing opportunity, and a tremendous gift. And everyone then becomes our savior, no matter who it is, because they're presenting us to us the contents of our unconscious mind for healing.
Yeah. And it can be, when we're right-minded, we can smile at it with, some some groundedness, and realize that I was sort of laughing as you started to say that, thinking that, well, at least right now, since all of the talks and everything are happening in Europe, everybody is at least dressed well. It's much more photogenic than it usually is. But that's kind of hilarious too, isn't it? Because that's exactly we try to differentiate. Yeah.
And we're all emperors here. Every one of us, in terms of the metaphysics of the course, is that everything that we think is real here is a giant facade. It's just an incredibly elaborate show that we've bought into, and
it's easier to see it with the pomp and circumstance going on.
Right.
As crazy as the ideology is sounding, that that's easier to sort of, for me, than the slaughter that you see. That's really very, very, very difficult.
Of course.
You have to see them both as the same kind, coming in content as the same.
Right. I was just going to say, when I started there, I call that pompous circus stench, but that's my own internal translation.
Our wordsmith.
Well, anyway, I think even those 4 paragraphs, I think we were going to try to keep this to about a half an hour. We probably about there now, if not.
Finish up with paragraph 4.
Did we finish the 4th one?
Oh, did we?
I
guess we did.
Maybe we did. Anyway, obviously we could go on, but
right, exactly.
All these lessons are so good, and every paragraph has.
Let's just read. I'm just going to read
one more?
The last one, or you can read it if you want.
Okay.
But just because I think it kind of sums up some of the metaphysics of this, and then
number 12.
That with number 5, is that?
Oh, okay, sure.
Yep. Yeah, not the last paragraph of the whole lesson, but the next.
Okay.
Paragraph.
Okay, sure. Death cannot come from life. Ideas remain united to their source. They can extend all that their source contains. In that, they can go far beyond themselves. But they cannot give birth to what was never given them. As they are made, so will their making be. As they were born, so will they then give birth. And where they come from, there will they return.
I'm going to read one more just because I think it concludes it.
Okay.
The mind can think it sleeps, but that is all. It cannot change what is its waking state as one in God. It cannot make a body nor abide within a body. What is alien to the mind does not exist because it has no source. For mind creates all things that are and cannot give them attributes it lacks, nor change its own eternal mindful state. It cannot make the physical. What seems to die is but the sign of mind asleep. Right.
That sounds pretty inclusive.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, it seems challenging. It's also basically within the same lesson, an incredibly potent reminder that the peace and really truly joyous awareness that is our birthright, that we've masked and covered over with a whole lot of involvement in dream identification, is really waiting for us. As you mentioned, earlier, that famous quote, "Dreaming of exile, but perfectly safe at home." So,
And we can see, when we're confronted with our concern for a loved one that's dying or ill or whatever, that what's been beautiful about the experience for me is really working within the mind with my own feelings and my mom with Jesus, and really seeing her, asking to see her as my sister trying to get home, just like everybody who believes that we're here, and trying to learn that we're not bodies, but that death is not a punishment, that the mind at any moment can choose to live, and choose to remember, and even if you are not there yet, can have it be gentle, have it be loving, have it be, have Jesus beside you as you go into that, and use it as a classroom.
absolutely.
So, there's great comfort in this course. This course never leaves us comfortless. And wherever we are in our journey home, the comfort can be right now for any mind. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a course student. It's all in content. It's all the same. And how you get there and what symbols you use. I think my mom was talking about seeing the Virgin Mary at one point last week or something. And, that's a beautiful symbol of that for her. And, we have that all within us, to return to love,
Exactly. And it gives us an example of, I was thinking of Ken's reading the Bible to his mother-in-law, I believe he talked about in one of his audios, and how
Right.
that was something that she could relate to. And I think because the Course meets us where we think we're at, that's an example for us to do the same with everyone in our lives, and not try to, put our agenda out onto, the people in our lives, but just basically, try to understand, that everyone's, fighting the same hard battle, and relate in a way that minimizes the fear and the threat, and provides a welcoming environment in our minds for people accepting the peace that we know is everyone's birthright.
Yeah, to just, I love you, you're loved,
Yeah.
you're, you can do
Yeah. Simple, isn't it?
yeah. Again, our role is very small. It's just to work with our own mind, and not try to just constantly be in control. So, yeah. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah. I think the only thing we thought to announce, other than your Tuesday class in Denver and your website, forreasonforgiveness.com, and the one I do with my acimblog.com, is that we're both participating in a virtual conference that's happening again this year. It had a 1-year hiatus, and now it's back again in 2018 in October. And we'll be announcing the specifics on how to register for that as soon as that website is ready. And should be another wonderful virtual conference for people interested in A Course in Miracles. So thanks again, and look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you.